An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This is our first night back in 2 years since we have been invited anybody into the Zendo for a Wednesday evening. Well, typically it has been a discussion group on a Wednesday evening, so we're returning to our regular practice. So I want to try to talk tonight about our first precept, not killing life. I will try because in our precepts, this might be the most difficult of the precepts. Or if you take each one, of course, we say, oh, that one is more difficult than another. But right now we are certainly witnessing a terrible, terrible war in Ukraine. And if we look at the screen at all and we watch the news, we are horrified by the devastation, by the stupidity and the devastation and the sheer treachery of it. And so not only do we have not killing life, but then we are become so angry that this has been perpetrated upon a free nation. So this question of not killing life is, of course, we can see that immediately in the subject of Ukraine. In our own daily lives, we kill meat to eat, or we kill plants to survive. So we have this impossibility of this precept of not killing life when we think about just eating lettuce. Or eating any kind of vegetables. We have to pull the vegetable out of the ground. We take its life and transform it into our own. And of course, plants don't scream back at us. Animals, of course, are another story. And for those who eat animals, from the time of human beings have consumed animals. We are carnivores. Of course, many people today have turned to a different diet and are not consuming animals. And gradually we are encouraging people to become vegetarian, pretty much for the sake of the planet. It's not even so much about not killing the animals, it's about not killing all life on the planet, because animals, particularly beef, require a great deal of soil, and they put out a great deal of methane. And so it takes a huge amount of acres to make even 1 pound of beef. So we're being encouraged, as we care about the planet, to think about changing our diet so that we don't deal in the killing of animals. In this question of war, humans have also been at war from as long as humans have been on this planet also. But simply because we always have been doesn't mean that we all always have to be. That it's a requirement. There's no requirement that we be at war. And yet, for some reason, we are so warlike that we tend to find ourselves in one war after another. I got a letter from my grandson today, who is in Paris in school at the moment, and he is studying international relations. And his entire very long letter was about the subject of Europe. And he simply said, Europe is at war. With this great sadness I could hear in his letter that Europe is at war. And of course, he is at an age where He will begin his military training after he finishes college next year. So we're all, anybody who has a son or, pretty much a son, women go to war also today too, and always have. But certainly as a Swiss citizen, he will be required to go to war, to a military training, but his sister will not. But there's no requirement that human beings be at war. We just seem to do it again and again and again. Perhaps we get bored or something. I really don't understand. And I don't understand the devastation of a culture. One of the oldest cultures, Ukraine is one of the oldest cultures in Europe. And to destroy the beauty of the cities for the sake of destruction, I simply don't understand it. So there's a positive side to this, that is our practice, primarily in Buddhism, in Zen practice. The notion of not killing life is that the idea of killing life doesn't enter the mind at all. And this is why it's so difficult, because we do kill life in order to eat, and we have many horrible notions throughout the day. We certainly, I hear from so many people as we talk about the war in Ukraine, very, very wicked thoughts that they would like to see perpetrated on one person. And so the practice of the precept is to not have the idea of killing enter the mind at all, or in any form in practice in daily life. It simply doesn't enter the mind. And that is the keeping of the precept then, that the notion of killing does not enter the mind. So the positive side of the not killing life is to nurture life, to promote life in ourselves and in others, primarily in others, to promote the well-being of life in others. This is not so easy, because to keep very excellent relations with everybody, very difficult matter. And life in community is very hard. We become fractious, or we see people we don't get along with, we don't like, or something like that. And so it's very, very difficult to promote life in somebody that we don't like, or somebody who irritates us, something like that. But to develop and nurture that practice itself, to nurture in ourselves right life, right kind life, right promotion of one's well-being is what our practice is, as far as the precepts are concerned. And then to promote that in others, to assist others in their own well-being. That is the first precept. And the precepts are given to us by Shakyamuni Buddha. And they have, there is a precept sutra. And it is very mysterious and very mystical, a very mystical precept that talks about all kinds of ways in which the precepts can be can be transmitted to others. And we ourselves can take the precepts ourselves, which of course, what we need to do every day. And I think somewhere in the sutra, it says something that if you spend your day and you do not keep the precepts, you are a bodhisattva, which is meaning that we encounter so many difficult situations in daily life, and we encounter so many situations, and sometimes we don't think what we are doing, and we break the precepts. But a bodhisattva doesn't just literally keep the precepts. The bodhisattva takes the precepts in the spirit of the promotion of good life in ourselves and in others. So that the idea of stealing, no taking what doesn't belong to us, just doesn't enter one's mind. And that's the keeping of the precepts. But for most of us, it's very difficult to not break the precepts sometimes, every day, in some ways. We get angry, we get annoyed. We look at the homeless and we think, what's the matter with you? And we steal in lots of ways too, unconscious ways. So the precepts are not simple and not easy, and yet they are the foundation of our ethical life and essentially the foundation of the development of our own mental state in clarity. At the same time, we cannot rigidly keep them. That would not be correct thing to do. So the precepts are not laws. They are the embodiment of the mind of Buddha. Let me say that. The truly wholesome, complete, virtuous mind of Buddha. So for many of us, we have so long a way to go to become Buddha, to become a good bodhisattva is not easy. And right now, not killing life is right in our faces. It's right there. And we are horrified at our human performance. We have to look at our own history of our own nation. And although I think when the first peoples came, it was not their intention to invade this country, but we did invade it as the years went on. We took over the land, we killed the originals, and we invaded. And we have deep karma to contend with. We brought slaves, and that is a form of killing life, of not even recognizing the dignity or human dignity of those lives. That's killing life. And I don't suggest that it's okay to invade, for Russia to invade Ukraine, but we have to recognize that our own country committed such crimes also. Many countries have. I know that people ask in the midst of this great conflagration, why do you sit Zazen? Zazen is our prayerful response to this. Zazen is perfect prayer, non-petitionary, but just perfect prayer, sitting in the midst of the bombing and the horrific range of killing. To sit in silence as the Buddha is perfect prayer. And people ask, why do we sit in the midst? I mean, should we go off and pick up guns, and what should we do? Why do we sit in silence when all that is going on? Why do we breathe? Is my answer, is my response. Why do we breathe? And we sit because we have to, because we must. Oh, I hope that everyone sitting will become very strong right now. We need such an enormous response to place the mind of the Bodhisattva, the mind of Buddha, foremost right now, to put it into the global circle of breath and air and transform our world as best we can. So maybe anybody has a question or some remark or something also on our screen. Yes, Bob.
You clarified something for me with regard to the precepts. Specifically,
could you speak loud so people can hear on that?
Specifically, not killing as a mind. I mean, for so long, I've thought about it in more concrete terms, of course, and then it just makes much more sense to me.
Well, we have the literal way that we can take, but we are the way of wisdom. And the way of wisdom is to stand in what is beneficial to life. So that is what's behind it, is the question of wisdom, and not a question of the literalness.
Yeah, what occurred to me were the opening passages of the Dhammapada, where the Buddha says exactly, it's the mind.
Yes.
If you create evil thoughts, of course, evil will follow.
Right.
And of course.
Well, the three poisons are certainly afoot right now in the action in Ukraine: greed, anger, and ignorance. The three poisons, that all of the poisons of the world, all our actions, our poor actions are somehow under that umbrella of greed, anger, and ignorance. And so we can find all of it there. And at the same time, it is very interesting to see the rest of the world stand up in unity against such action. So, we are political beings, and I know maybe people are thinking that we ought not speak about this as Zen Buddhists, so we don't engage in politics, but we do engage in politics. You engage in politics when you're more than one person anywhere. As soon as you have two people together, you have politics anywhere. And that's the truth. And when we see this kind of destruction and behavior and greed, we must stand up against it. We cannot allow that simply because we're in the relative world. No, in the absolute world, there is no killing. There is no war. There is nothing like that in the absolute, in the true absolute. But when the absolute is not manifested in the relative, we must fix the relative. We have to deal with it in relative terms. And so we engage politically to stand against war, to stand against this particular war. And so many nations, how many nations, 100 and some odd nations have stood together and proclaimed this is wrong. Years ago, I was in Hawaii visiting Aitken Roshi. And Aitken Roshi was dying. I went to see him because I wanted to see him before he died, although he was doing fine. He was in a wheelchair, but he had had a stroke and he was not well. And one of the afternoons, he said, "We must go downtown and demonstrate against the Iraq war." He was adamant that we haul him in the car, pick him up bodily. We'll collapse the wheelchair, take him downtown to Honolulu and stand on the street at noon when all the workers were out and declare that the war in Iraq was wrong, stop the war. And I was absolutely, we couldn't do it. He was way too infirm to be able to take him to do that. But I will never forget his determination to stand against war. And he had that kind of mind that could stand in the absolute and, you know, look with it with great force upon the relative world and stand up to people and say, stop that, don't do that. I will never forget him for that. It was just so remarkable and beautiful. All the people in countries everywhere who are standing against this and demonstrating, and for the people in Moscow and all around Russia who have given up their lives to go to prison for standing up and declaring the war wrong. They will be some of them in prison for 10 years simply for standing on the street. But it's that kind of mind. But I think that Aitken Roshi also was of the mind that you didn't have to be greatly enlightened. You didn't have to have some extraordinary enlightenment experience in order to go out and do this kind of work. He said, you become enlightened as you go. that immediate declaration to put yourself forward like that was the beginning of that road of true bodhisattvahood and awakening. So we must sit zazen. We must sit zazen in the face of this destruction of life. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it.